Well, good morning, everyone. So it's a thrill this morning to introduce Professor Amir Faruqi and Justin Futrell, class of 2016. I have to tell you a small little story. So I was at the Cedar Rapids Airport heading out on a trip, must have been midday, and I bumped into a faculty member and just a couple students, Professor Faruqi and Justin Futrell, coming back from Tanzania as I was heading out. And I will never forget this moment because Justin came up to me, like right here, took his finger, gave me a nice gentle little tap, looked me right in the eyes, and he said, "This trip changed my life forever." And it's with that context that I'm thrilled to have them here today to talk to you about their experiences related to Tanzania. Professor Faruqi and Justin.
Well, good morning. We appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you to share our experience in Tanzania. In January 2016, nearly 4 years ago, Justin and I traveled to Tanzania along with 9 other Cornell students for a 2.5 weeks off-campus study experience. The course was entitled Economic Development in Tanzania, and it was cross-listed in the Economics and Business and Politics departments. I'll make a few introductory comments to sort of provide the background and establish the context, and then we'll have Justin share his reflections and talk about how the trip influenced what he did after Cornell. Before we go much further, Justin is an accomplished map maker, so we'll take a break and have Justin display his map of Africa.
Believe it or not, this is about 10 times better than yesterday. So I didn't know where Tanzania was when I signed up for the course. So just wanted to let you all know that Tanzania is in East Africa. Some countries around it, to give you a geographic idea, is we have Uganda, Somalia is up here further north, Kenya is right above, the Dominican Republic of the Congo, and Mozambique at the southern border.
A little bit later, I'll throw in a few details about the country itself, but let's get started with the journey. Our trip had a little bit of everything, bone-rattling van rides, long layovers at airports, near-death experiences in the traffic, heat and humidity in Dar, 2 bathrooms for 16 people over 5 days in Mtenko, power outages and class discussions by candlelight, scenes of deprivation in villages, upset stomachs, sleep deprivation, malaria pills, charging elephants, and tsetse flies. So a journey to the heart of Africa is not for the faint of heart. It takes determination, a willingness to take risk, intellectual curiosity, and openness to foreign cultures. And the Cornell students were certainly up to the challenge. At the outset, let me say that the trip was made possible by the efforts of Dean Reeson, Cornell alum, class of 1979. He's a highly successful businessman who currently lives in Arizona. He has been involved in charitable works in Tanzania for almost 20 years. He made all of the arrangements for the trip and led our Cornell group during the visit. Our academic objective was to study issues of economic development and poverty alleviation by visiting water projects implemented by Dean Reeson in rural areas. These projects are designed to provide clean water by digging wells powered by solar energy. More on that as we go along. Let me summarize our itinerary so you have an understanding of the context. The itinerary is pretty hectic. We started in Washington, D.C., where we met with U.S. State Department officials and congressional staff members with expertise in Africa. We also talked with aid workers in World Vision, a Catholic relief and development NGO. We then flew to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania's largest city, a port on the Indian Ocean. We met with development experts in the U.S. Embassy, officials in various Tanzanian government ministries, and representatives of NGOs working in the country. Dar es Salaam was our introduction to Tanzania, and we'll have Justin take a minute or two to share some initial impressions.
So we land in Dar es Salaam and we get to our hotel. Dar es Salaam has about 4 million people, so think big city. And we do all this, put yourself in the shoes where you're going in with your own thoughts, right? You have what you think you're going to see. We get into our hotel, I'm on the 15th floor. I look out the window and I see the ocean, right? We're on the coast. I see the ocean. And I look down, and the grass is green, and there's sprinklers on it. And this is my first moment of like, what? I'm confused. We've been reading about poverty and people not having access to clean water, and I feel like I'm in Florida or Myrtle Beach on vacation, right? So this was the first moment that we were a little bit confused.
From Dar es Salaam, we flew to Arusha, a major city in the country's north, which is a gateway to tourist attractions like Mount Kilimanjaro and the game reserves in Ngorongoro and the Serengeti. From Arusha, we drove in vans to the very center of the country, through the Great Rift Valley to the provincial town of Singida. This was our main hub of activity. We stayed in the nearby village of Mtinko for 5 days in a convent run by a German order of Catholic nuns. We traveled to several villages to see water projects being run by Dean Reeson's team, and we also visited schools and health clinics. One school visit left an enormous impression on all of us, and we'll have Justin take a minute to share his memories of this visit.
Yeah, adding some color to this first school, right? We drive for 2 hours out in the middle of rural Africa. We're just looking at the countryside, dirt, rocks, and a school out of nowhere. And when we pull into this long driveway, there are kids lined up, 8 rows of kids, singing and dancing, awaiting our arrival. They were so excited to see us, and we had no idea why. We walked up and they handed us a rose, a flower, as their way to say welcome. The other quick story that I will share with you is, it was my first experience communicating with someone that knew another language, and there was a communication barrier. So we found that outside of how do you communicate? Think about it. You have to use nonverbal communication, so we started writing back and forth. She was learning English, she was a 9-year-old girl, so we wrote a few sentences back and forth, and that was the most impactful thing. I remember meeting Geraldine, the little 9-year-old girl.
So after spending 5 days in Mtinko and nearby villages, we started our journey back. We went to Tarangire National Park for a 2-day safari. Tarangire is the 5th largest game reserve in Tanzania, known for its population of elephants, thus my earlier reference to charging elephants. It was mating season and our presence was not always welcome. our final stop was a day in Zurich, Switzerland for some R&R and decompression before flying home. So that's our itinerary. Let me say a few words about Tanzania by way of introduction. You already know the location. It's a fairly large country, twice the size of California in land area, and a population, a substantial population of 55 million. 2/3 of the people live in rural areas. It is a relatively poor country with an income per person, an annual income per person of $3,500. The annual income per person in the US is variously estimated as between $55,000 to $60,000. So this is $3,500, ranking Tanzania about 150 out of 200 countries. It is an agricultural economy, with coffee being its main cash crop. It has tribal and religious diversity, 130 tribes, many of them small, and an interesting religious mix of 60% Christian and 35% Muslim. It does not have well-developed irrigation systems, and agriculture is reliant on rain. It has 2 rainy seasons, the short rains in the late fall and the long rains in the spring. Speaking of rain, let me talk briefly about water. Justin will talk about that much more in a few minutes. The study of water resources was our entry into the study of economic development and poverty alleviation. Due to population growth and pollution and deforestation and climate change, water resources are under tremendous stress in many parts of the developing world, including Tanzania. This is a complicated story, but as you can imagine, water scarcity and the lack of access to clean water has remarkable implications. I'll just cite a couple quickly. One implication is obvious: the danger of waterborne diseases, cholera, typhoid, and above all diarrhea, which kills millions in poor countries, notably children. Another adverse implication is the problem of water fetching. Women having to walk long distances to fetch water from distant municipal taps. This takes away time from productive work. It keeps young girls out of school and endangers women's health and personal safety. I'll ask Justin to say a few words about the vital role of water resources.
I like pictures. So the whole class, we were around this model of what is making the difference, what's going on here, how can we analyze this from afar, and what we all agreed on is that water was the foundation of improvement. First, we need water. People need access to clean water, just like Professor Faruqi said. Women and children would walk up to 5 hours every 2 days in search of water. That's time that they cannot be in school becoming educated. So first we have to take care of water, then comes education. We also have health care. Yes, there's care that is involved with water, like Professor suggested, but also there's the AIDS epidemic that they've been overcoming, as well as the tsetse fly and yellow fever, all of these things, right? So we mentioned meeting with people in DC, in Dar es Salaam, the capital, and in rural areas. The interesting thing is, of course, the people in healthcare argued that the second most important thing was healthcare. And the people in education argued that education is next most important, naturally. The interesting thing was, between DC over here, the capital, in Dar es Salaam, and actually in rural Tanzania, whether this was World Vision, the non-governmental organization, faith-based, whether that's USAID, the government organization, there was never a clear path of communication all the way across. And it was hard to believe, because even though they thought they knew what was going on here, it's like the telephone game, right? Eventually, the message changes. And that was a really interesting and hard thing to see at times. And then all leading up to economic development, being able to be farmers, being able to have their own small businesses and things like that.
So I'll take a few more minutes before I turn things over to Justin. So in the next segment, we would like to share with you some student perspectives. The students maintained journals during the trip and prepared reflection essays after their return. In their writings, the students on the trip offered analytical as well as personal commentary on what they had observed. So they wrote a lot, and I just condensed their writings into a couple of paragraphs. Some students wrote about being captivated by the splash of color and the lushness of the landscape. The role of women in this traditional society caught everyone's attention. They seemed to be doing a lot of work, tilling the soil, fetching wood and water, and raising children. But when they were seen in village meetings or in school classrooms, they were often reluctant to speak up. The complex transition from a traditional to modern society caught the students' attention. It was reflected in any number of interesting contradictions. For example, the use of wooden plows juxtaposed with the electronic banking using cellular networks, the M-Pesa system in East Africa. Despite the privations the students observed, some students sounded a note of optimism. One student wrote, quote, "There was good nearly everywhere we went, and there were signs of resourcefulness around every corner." Several students worried about ethical issues raised by their privileged presence in a poor country. Quote, "Here we were stuffing our faces with the best foods around before going out to learn about extreme poverty and malnutrition," one student wrote. Another asked, "Was it a good thing that we paid good money to be here, contributing to their GDP, or were we just like other white people who had entered before us, taking what they wanted?" Crossing cultural boundaries was not always easy. The sight of school children wanting to touch blonde hair was at the very least unexpected, if not perplexing, even though the children were very young. For one of our students, it brought to mind a disturbing idealization of Western notions of beauty. And the encounter with the woman who drank from a contaminated pool of water rather than walk a few meters to access clean water for a small fee left the visitors in a state of disbelief. In conversations I've had with Justin, he said he was particularly moved by this experience. And so I'll use that as a segue to turn the conversation over to him to retell this story, other stories of his time in Tanzania, and how his experience there led him, some years later, to contribute in his own way.
All right, I just realized not everyone can see this, so I'll try to do a better job of turning it back and forth. But talking about that moment with the mother, right, that was the most impactful moment for me. We go out to these villages. We went to villages who had water put in recently, water wells. We went to villages where there was no water at all and no plan for it. And we went to villages where a well had been drilled into the ground. So half the project had been completed and they were just waiting on the other half. So we really got three different perspectives from villages. We were at this village visiting and they had water. Okay, so we're in the countryside. There's this small village, a few thousand people, and a little boy runs up to the well, flips the spigot. You can look at the pictures beside you. There are some handouts. Pass those around your row, and I'm gonna wait a second. That's like a good teacher moment. You can't tell someone to do something and then make a point. Okay, so if you see the little boys filling up water, that's a spigot of water, so they flipped the spigot and filled a jug. Just imagine a jug of antifreeze. That's what it looked like, just a yellow jug with water. And this little boy just happily wandered off, right, middle of the day. And I was like, this is cool. This is why we're here. Because little kids like this have clean water now. And we're walking back to our Jeep 50 yards away. I'm not exaggerating, it might be closer to 30 yards away. Regardless, you can see how big the size of the well is. It's a big structure out there. We're not worried about visibility. This mother can see the well. And she bends down with a 5-gallon bucket to fill her bucket with a puddle of stagnant water. A cow is laying in this puddle of water. And in that moment, we didn't understand. The water is right there. What are you doing? Our translator explained to us that she said she couldn't afford it. She would afford it during dry season. She would make a way to pay it. But during wet season, since there was water and puddles, it's what she'd always done. She would use that water to bathe, to cook meals for her family to drink. And that was the moment for me that was just eye-opening. And as we traveled to the next village a couple hours away, I had a chance to reflect on that. You have this painful thought of trying to help and think back to the books we read about toxic charity. Well, is it really a good thing we're giving water if we're not explaining how the process can work? If we can't explain the benefits of clean water, then why would you change what you're doing? Because all of you don't like change. That's how we're wired as humans. We're resistant to change. We have to make a point to make a change out of our routine. So you have this really good thing of the boy, and you see hope, and then you have this despair, and you say, this can't keep happening. And that was the moment that I said, I want to, someday in my life, help raise money for a water well project. And in my head, I was thinking, when I'm old and retired and have a lot of money, I'm going to donate, and we're going to build a well, right? So a year goes by after college, and I kind of think about it, man, should I do a fundraiser? And I didn't. I'll do it later, right? I'll do it later in life. Another year goes by, and I have the same nagging thoughts. Should I try it? What do you need to do a fundraiser? I don't have the money. And then finally, I just decided to do it. I talked to Dean Reeson, our alumni. He was super helpful throughout. Quick moments, I'll run through and come back to the well. Playing with the kids at the schools was amazing and super impactful. Professor Farouk even played soccer. Everyone had cell phones, even though we were talking about water and the struggles for water. Most villages had cell phones. It was a really interesting thing to think about. And if a village had a pool table, that was how we knew they made it. Because a lot of people played pool. And the mother, which is where we are now. So here are the facts. When you want to do something, you need to figure out the facts. And the first fact that I knew was that a water well is $45,000. These water wells that Dean does, they cost a lot. You can see the pictures. They cost a lot because it's about $20,000 to drill, about $20,000 to pump. And then we have a storage tank we need up top for the dry seasons, and also solar panels so it is sustainable. So once we do get the message across of the importance of clean water, people can continue to do it year after year because we can get hand pumps that are $15,000 and they'll dry up in 5 to 10 years. And then what was the reason for doing that? Because people will just go back to how it was before. So 5 hours a day walking, we talked about that. This is the impact. Like people, you can hear that and say, wow, 5 hours every 2 days looking for water, that would be awful. So that's what I know people can feel. And Dean Reeson said you need a hook. So the hook was to do 1,000 pull-ups in 1 day. because people laugh. Because people say there's no way that you can do it. And the one thing that always came back was from my playing days here at Cornell. I played football, and Coach Brogdon always said, find a way. Find a way. So, find a way to do 1,000 pull-ups and raise $25,000. That was the mindset. A couple of quick facts. 300 donors, everything from $5 to $500. We raised $10,000 the first day, and it went absolutely viral. I think the reason for that is because how many people were involved and excited about the fundraiser, right? People were like, this is crazy, I'm gonna tell my friend about it. And then at this moment, when I'm about 500 pull-ups in and my hands are ripped and bleeding, I realize that you don't have to have a lot of money to make a difference. You can be the vehicle for whatever difference, for whatever passion you have. You just need to find a way to figure out how to do it. So one day it goes viral. We end up raising money, $25,000. It's $45,000 total on the papers. I have a little note about Chris Long. You may have heard of him. He was the Walter Payton Man of the Year in the NFL last year. He has this project called the Water Boys, and he's put in over 70 wells in coordination partly with Dean Reesing from Cornell College. So he'll match $20,000 of every $25,000 that Dean or we raise, which is a really cool partnership. 4,650 people. Who's from a small town with less than 5,000 people? Raise your hand. Probably 30 hands up right now. Imagine your whole town that you grew up with not having water. Not having clean water. Now they do. Now they do. There are a lot of challenges that come with this. Overall, I have 2 minutes here to wrap up, and my challenge is you. When I was thinking about what to talk about to you, I like to challenge people, right? And some people say it's encouraging to see the passion come out. Well, that's because I care about what I'm doing, and more importantly, I care about what you are going to do. I care about what passion that you can find in your heart. You don't know what that is. You might not know what that is today. I was just speaking at Anamosa High School this morning. The first thing we did was put our name and our dream job. Whether you're working toward your dream job every day, grinding, working on your major, your hard classes, or you end up on another path. That's what happened for me. I was a senior, and I had no intention to study off campus. So my challenge to you today is to keep your eyes open, because you don't know what kind of opportunity might come your way. If you have a chance to study off campus, I think it's a great way to get a fresh perspective, a new perspective, and when the day comes that you find what you're passionate about, find a way to make a difference. Thank you.